right, here we're going to look through our notes and work through our notes through section 1.3. So the ones that you're going to need is you're going to need one that looks like this. And please go ahead and in just a minute take some time to cut it so you'll see all of the flaps. The other one, these three pieces came on the same page, so you'll need to cut them out. And then the top and middle layer, you'll actually need to cut along the sides as well. The bottom one stays as one whole. And then you're going to need this one that says the do-undo method. Okay, so go ahead and take a second and get those three cut out, those 3 pages cut out so you're ready to go. So here we're really going to be looking at the different steps to solving our equations. But the first thing we always want to start with is our learning targets. So back in the beginning of our notebook, we're going to look and we can solve multi-step equations, but then also solve equations with variables on both sides. And then we're going to talk a little bit about special solutions of equations. Okay, so those are the real things we're going to be working on today. So our steps to solving equations. Okay, so if we're going to just follow along an example together. So here's the example that I want you to write down. We're going to have 4 times the quantity x plus 3 minus 4 equals 8 times 1/2 x plus 1 plus 2x. So there's our equation we're going to work through together. So the first step here is we're going to do the distributive property. And remember that the distributive property means I multiply anything that's outside the parentheses to everything that's inside. So I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite this. Equals 8 times 1/2 x plus 1 plus 2x. Because the distributive property tells me to multiply right here. So what I'm left with is 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 3 is 12, minus 4 equals 8 times 1/2, and I know that 1/2 of 8 is 4x, and then 8 times 1 is 8, and then I have my 2x here. Okay? So the next thing I have to do is I have to combine like terms that are on the same side of each of the equal sign. Okay? So what I notice is that these two would be like terms because neither of them have a variable, but then I also see that I have this 4x and this 2x on the right side. So on the left side, I'm left with 4x, 12 plus a negative 4 is plus 8, equals the 2 that I'm combining here, 4x plus 2x is 6x plus 8. Okay? So now we're going to go ahead and do the next step. We're going to move the variables to the same side. So in reality, it doesn't matter which side you pick. Often we want to pick the side that already has the largest one, just so we don't end up with negatives. So in order to move the variables to the same side, I am going to go ahead and subtract this 4x, and I subtract it because there's no sign in front of it over here. So since there's nothing here, I know it's addition. So I'm going to subtract 4x from this side and subtract 4x from this side. Because remember, what I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So that cancels out. So that gives me 8 equals 6x plus 8. So the next thing I have to do is I need to undo addition or subtraction because I'm working through the order of operations backwards. So to undo the addition, I would subtract 8, and what I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So that gives me 6x equals 0. Then the last step is I have to undo multiplication or division. So here I see I'm multiplying, and so in order to undo multiplying, I divide. So I'm going to divide by 6 and divide by 6. So x in this case will equal 0. Okay? So I've gone ahead and I've followed my different steps. And I ended up with a solution. And it's okay to end up with a solution of 0 because that's still a real thing. So now I want you to go ahead and glue or tape this into your notebook so that it stays there. I'm going to come back and do that in just a little bit. So the next thing I really want to touch briefly on is the number of solutions. Right? Because there are certain cases where we have special solutions. So number of solutions. So when you're solving these equations, sometimes you'll end up with x equals some value. Okay? So when you end up with that, and x equals a value, that means there's one solution. And this value is the solution. There will be times when your x's or your variables go away. And there's two different cases where that. Sometimes you'll end up with 3 equals 3. This I know is a true statement, right? 3 is 3. So this means no matter what I put in for x, I will get a true value. So this means there's an infinite number of solutions, right? Because no matter what I put in, I'm going to get this 3 equals 3. The other possibility is I end up with something like 3 equals 5, once I've gone through all of my steps and solved it. Well, this is not true. So this would tell me that no matter what I put in, it's not going to work. So this right here would be no solutions. Okay, so these are just some special ways that we can keep track of how many solutions we're looking at and what it's really going to be. So the next thing I want you to go ahead and do, hopefully because it'll fit on the same page, is this is just going to be a resource for you. I'm not going to read through all of it, but I'm just going to kind of show you how it works. So these 3 pages kind of fit together. Okay, and you'll see top layer, middle layer, bottom layer. So this is a really cool just resource. So we're going to start at the top always. So look at the equation. Are there any grouping symbols? If yes, you can flip the tab and it'll tell you what to do. Okay, use the distributive property. If no, you flip that tab and it'll tell you what to do. There are no grouping symbols. Go to the next step. So whenever we're solving any kind of equation, we can follow these steps and really make sure that we're getting everything done in the correct order. Okay, so go ahead and we're going to glue these, just the edges together, so that you have a little fancy flip book in your notes. Okay, the final thing we're really going to talk about here is this do-undo method. Okay, so the example we're going to walk through on this one is we're going to solve for x, and here's our problem. I've got 5 times the quantity x plus 7 divided by 3 equals 20. So on this little front flap, right, because we're going to fold this over, this little front flap is going to be our do side. And when I'm doing, I go down the line. Okay, so the first step I do, when I'm doing this problem, I start with x. So I end up with x right here. Okay, so the second thing I see that I'm doing is I add 7. So I end up with x plus 7. The next thing, according to my order of operations, is I multiply by 5. So I end up with 5 times that x plus 7. The last thing that I see over here is I'm going to divide by 3, right? And here I'm just kind of following my order of operations. So I divide by 3. So I end up with that 5 times x plus 7 divided by 3. The very final thing is I see that I end with 20. So then I have my whole thing. Okay, so when I'm doing my order of operations, this is kind of what I will do. Well, that doesn't help me when I'm asked to solve for this. So here's where I want to undo. So we're going to flip it and we're going to undo on the inside. And when we undo, generally, we kind of work the other direction. So when I'm undoing this, I want to go ahead and just like on the first page where we ended with 20, right? We end with 20 down here at the bottom. We're going to start with 20. So the next thing when I'm undoing this problem, I'm going to multiply by 3. Right? Because I'm undoing the things that are done to this x. So then I end up with 20 times 3, which is 60. So my real problem looks like then 5 times x plus 7 equals 60. So the next thing to undo here would be, I see I'm multiplying, so I'm going to divide by 5. So then I end up with x plus 7 equals, and then 5 goes into 60 12 times. The next thing I see that I'm doing is I'm adding 7, so to undo that, I subtract 7. So I end up with x equals 5. And so that's where I end up with. I end with 5. So when we're solving, we're really just starting with this value that we have all by itself on the equal side, and we work backwards. We try and go back towards where the x or the value is that we're looking for. Okay? So now I want you to go ahead and keep this as just kind of a reminder to look through it and look after it. So really that's all that we're looking at for the section 1.3. We're really just going to be following our steps. The one you're really going to want to have with you for this whole section while you're working on your homework is this first one. Because this is the order that you are always going to follow. Always start with the distributive property. Then combine the different terms on each individual side. Move all your variables to one side. Then once that's done, now you're going to undo any addition or subtraction, and then you're going to undo the multiplication and division. Once that happens, don't forget that there's a possibility of different solutions from there. So make sure you have that as well. So now that we've walked through our notes, and you should have them glued into your notebook, go ahead and spend some time working on that practice. And as always, contact me when you get stuck or have questions.